Thank you, Peter.
Brenda, thank you for allowing myself and one of my co-authors, Scott Donaldson, to share with you today about missing measures of competitive procurements. How well is your company doing today? Win the business of tomorrow. And upfront, I just want to say that I personally am grateful to everything that you've done in your career because you and your peers, I've benefited from that professionally. And so I just want to let you know that. So my name is Peter Leone, and I'm the lead principal at Solutioneering, and I have another principal, Scott Donaldson, who in the webinar. And I grew up professionally doing delivery. And in the firm that I was in, eventually we all eventually started doing capture. And I'm passionate about, and I believe that we are in a thinking person's business. If you want to win a high dollar value, solution based, mission critical prime contract in the federal government, you have to think. And, so a lot of the things that I'm going to say today, you'll probably agree with. Some things you won't. Some things you'll partially agree with. Some things you'll see value in. Some things you may not. That's okay. This is going to be a professional exchange. But the deal is won or lost before we put pen to paper. It's won or lost before we hit a keyboard, and particularly before we do a Gen AI prompt. And we have to realize that winning a competitive pursuit is a whole of company effort, a whole of company effort. It's very unfair to say, well, the proposal team lost the pursuit. And it's at the same time, it's not right to say, well, we won because of the proposal team. And so I've spent a good part of my career taking the knowledge that has been given to me and my experiences and focusing on something. How do we close the upfront thinking gap that occurs in our business? So many years ago, Scott introduced me to a measurement technique that he developed with Dr. Stan Siegel, the late Dr. Stan Siegel, called object measurement. And this was a technique that could be used to measure anything in everyday language. And it's based on vector math. So we're not going to get overly technical with you on this discussion. But from the moment I learned that technique, I applied it to everything I did when I did delivery, when I was managing programs. And what I was really doing was I was taking a measures-driven approach to managing uncertainty. So naturally, when I started doing capture, I'm a systems thinker. I applied that measurement technique to measure how well the capture efforts were progressing. So let's jump into this now, this presentation. I just wanted to set the stage there. The most important question in a competitive procurement is why your company. I don't care if it is a $100 million pursuit or it's a SBIR or whatever the case may be. And there are no shortcuts to winning. Now, I might even say some things about generative AI today that people would disagree with, but I'm going to say them nonetheless as we progress. It's about the critical thinking. And most people don't want to think. Not that they can't, it's just that thinking takes time and effort. But the moment you think you're going to outsource thinking or not do it at all, and I mean outsource it, yeah, you could outsource it to a third party that might help you win. You could try to outsource it. You could try to leverage the technology. As far as I'm concerned, you're on a slippery slope to a loss. And we're going to go into that. And when you win a competitive pursuit, it's a challenge of multiple perspectives. The business developer, well, even before that, the C-suite, the chief growth officer, the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the business developer, the capture manager, the solution architect, proposal manager. Everybody has a different perspective. In my world, when I approach things, if I'm doing capture, that proposal team is my customer. That solution architect is my customer. Those technical writers are my customer. In our business, you know, if we don't set the people downstream, internal stakeholders up for success, then we just, at best, produced an output that was compliant and on time. So we say, who's the most important customer in a competitive pursuit? It's the person in the company that you owe your best to in order to help them be successful. And that's how these measures work. Likewise, a challenge is you see a lot of people in companies, and they say, oh, we have $1 billion pipeline. And they say, oh, yeah, we're tracking that opportunity. Well, there's a big difference between working something and tracking something. In my experience, most BD professionals and capture professionals, week after week, BD meeting after BD meeting, they're just tracking stuff. They're not working it. So what does it mean to work it? So there's a body of knowledge based upon 3 books that have been written in the past few years that will talk about working, doing the work. One is called Solution Engineering, which helps you use a framework called the Solution Engineering Framework, which I'll elaborate on, that helps us do that upfront thinking in advance of the writing. It closes what I call the thinking gap. And then there's the green book, as I like to say, Missing Measures of Competitive Procurements, the latest book that I co-authored with Scott Donaldson, who's on the call, and our other co-author, Mario Pina. And that helps us measure, really, are we doing the right things per the framework described in the blue book? Are we doing them well? And can we show material evidence of it? And it helps, in the end, these indices collectively help answer that question. How well are we doing today to win the business of tomorrow? You know, I feel that if you go to a business development meeting, which many of you have been in, and you have somebody saying, well, this is our win strategy. Truth is, in most cases, there's nothing behind that slide. In my world, just like in science, law, and medicine, if you can't show material evidence that's traceable, defensible, and explainable to how you got to what you're saying, then you're setting everybody else up for failure. And when we talk about using generative AI, the government's onto us. That's why they're going more towards orals. They immediately know that the Gen AI output looks like spam. So companies that are using Gen AI, increasing their productivity, are killing their brand. I'm not saying don't use Gen AI. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying that. But if you're going to use it without doing the upfront thinking, then you're in trouble. The other white book is just an illustrative way, a fun way how we describe the principles in the book. Now let's talk about the first challenge that we called out, the thinking challenge. The common challenge in our business is, understanding the goodness of information presented by business developers and capture managers to the C-suite and everybody else. Let's be honest. Most business developers and capture managers that we often deal with, regrettably, because they're not doing the upfront work, they're full of it. And you really know the ones that have done their homework and know it because they can show you materially how they got to what they're saying. They didn't do the upfront work. So many years ago, many years ago, when I was doing capture and I had the good fortune of winning pursuits, I was encouraged to put my thinking down. And after our firm was acquired, my founder said to me, this framework that you created closes a gap in the market. The market doesn't show us how to think. So I'm going to describe this framework at a very high level very quickly. I call it the Solution Engineering Framework. Part of this framework is trying to understand the customer's issues and why they're issues, the customer psychographics, the priority of those issues. We're trying to know the rationale to those issues. We're trying to know what has to be brought to the table stakes. We call them key factors that align to addressing those issues. They're not the solution, but to help frame it and address those issues in a many-to-many relationship. And just like the secret sauce behind the issue is why is it an issue, the secret sauce behind the key factors is why is it important to the customer. And we look at these key factors from a technical perspective, and that could be software development or accounting forensics. So technical is a general term. Or management, how are we going to manage the contract in a risk-reduced manner? We look at it from a personnel perspective. and a corporate experience perspective. It's the issues and key factors that drive the requirements. We all see the requirements, but if you don't know what the issues and key factors are really driving it, and ideally you've tested them with the customer, then your pursuit is like a house built on sand. And then you need to know what the notional winner looks like, the ideal winner, the benchmark, right? The notional winner benchmark. The notional winner doesn't exist, even if you're incumbent, because nothing's ideal in life. We have to know why those benchmark items are important. So if we've done an issue key factor analysis, that gives us really good material evidence of what the ideal winner looks like in the eyes of the customer. So these are different types of analyses that we're doing. We have to know the customer's internal challenges, conditions, constraints. If we do that due diligence, then we're really in a position to do a competitive assessment. Now, I always recommend, besides doing an internal competitive assessment, which I'll go into, we should also use by third-party intelligence when we can to make sure that we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid. But in the framework, when we do the framework, we could do a SWOT analysis or a bidder comparison. We could do a weighted average comparison or a Port of Five Forces analysis or Black Hat review. And those are techniques we could help do a competitive assessment with to help answer why our company or why not our company or why our competitor, why not a competitor. And we would do these different techniques to help us identify strengths and weaknesses for our company and that of our competition. So eventually we could highlight our strengths and minimize our weaknesses and neutralize our strengths and more. So eventually from doing these different types of analyses, and I'm not going to go into all of them, we could answer in a traceable, defensible, and explainable manner why our company. So I just gave you a very partial, high-level description of the framework, which is described in detail in the blue book that I mentioned, Solution Engineering. But now we talk about performance measurement indices. These are leading indicators. When you think of earned value when managing a program, that's a lagging indicator. But the indices are leading indicators. In fact, if we look at the two measures that are very often in our business, PGO, is it funded? Because we want to pursue things that are not funded, or PWin. Well, PWin is really a fictitious number to me. It's like the temperature of the day. As children, we learned in high school, Y is a function of X. Well, in our world, PWin is a function of, did you do the right things? Did you do it well? And can show material evidence of it through the indices, which we'll go into. But the indices are meant to give us early insight to help our decision-making and increase our probability of winning. And when we're doing a pursuit, again, winning is a team sport. No one can say, well, I won this deal. I'm the reason we won this deal. Baloney. Everybody had a role to play. But very often, it's the people upstream in C-suite business development and capture that are really the real root causes of competitive loss. They're not setting up everybody else for success. Solution architect, technical writers, proposal team, etc. So people often think of, performing your job from a single perspective, and this is not the case. So in our world, and we explain this in the green book, as I like to call it, without having to say missing measures of competitive procurements the whole time, is that we lay out what we call opportunity resource planning, a matrix that allows you, based upon your role, based upon the amount of time you have, based upon the maturity of the organization that's pursuing the pursuit, how they have to think based upon those constraints. And we're allowing those individuals to perform their work in a way that can show, as we say, in a traceable, defensible, explainable manner. I can show you the goodness of what I'm doing, such that we provide transparency into work accomplished, personal accountability, right? Feedback for informed decision-making, and insights to performance improvement. I make one comment, and that would be, technology will never make you win a competitive pursuit. Do not invest in technology thinking this technology is going to help us win. What it makes us win a competitive pursuit is culture. It's culture. And what binds a culture together, those core values inside the culture, holding each other accountable, mutual respect, those kind of things. But what the measurements do is help keep that culture in check by providing what we call TAFE, the transparency, the accountability, allowing for the feedback, allowing for the improvement. Now, we talked about a lot of individuals in the BD capture world. They like to brag and say, "Oh, yeah, we're tracking that." There's a big difference between tracking and working, as I said. If the business acquisition team can't show material evidence that they've been doing the upfront analyses, producing authentic intelligence, you want nothing coming out of a machine. That's artificial. You can use machines, but authentic means that you're doing a particular type of analysis and you're doing the most important thing to winning a competitive pursuit, the most human of things. It's dialogue. Dialogue, doing a particular type of analysis, getting insight from many diverse sources, whether it's a SWOT analysis, a bidder comparison, qualifying and discriminators, whatever, and getting that insight and understanding and making a decision with sound rationale. Human has to be in the loop early, up front, not when you're Gen AI prompting or producing something from generative AI and then putting people on the back end, because that's like building security into your software if you're already deployed it. It's too late. So that's why you have to be doing the analyses upfront before you apply tools. And so again, when we're doing that, it helps us answer these fundamental questions. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we doing them well? And can we show material evidence of it? So eventually, where Y is a function of X, P1 is a function of doing those things I just mentioned. Now, what are the indices? Well, there's 8 of them. There's the pipeline opportunity selection index, and I'll give one example as we elaborate on that one a little bit later. But am I putting the right things into my pipeline? Does it merit it? How often does something come into a company's pipeline and all of a sudden it takes a life of its own? And it should have never been put in a pipeline in the first place. Scott and I have a history with a company where we helped about a year and a half ago, and they had 4 or 5 business developers that they were paying a lot of money to. And it's June of the year. And the company was licensing our software, and they asked us to, hey, can you help us assess the goodness of the pipeline? One of the first things we did was we just said, let's do a pipeline opportunity selection index assessment and also a state of the opportunity index assessment. And we quickly realized, holy cow, these guys don't have a pipeline. And in the aggregate, the company didn't have a pipeline starting in the buying season. And that was not a very good place to be. So the POSSE, Pipeline Opportunity Selection Index, measures, hey, does this even belong in our pipeline? That's where all problems start. Many problems start. State of the Opportunity Index helps us measure the goodness of evolving business development efforts. So once something is qualified to be in my pipeline, qualitatively and quantitatively, right? That's what these measures provide to us, qualitative and quantitative insight. What's the evolving goodness of the business development efforts? And there's nothing wrong with killing something. Then Opportunity Context Index, which has 2 purposes. How well do we really understand this to bid it? Because if you have no context of it, no true understanding of bidding it, you shouldn't put it into capture. But should you bid it, and that's a business decision, what's the goodness of the handoff between business development and capture? That is a valley of death, as we know. As a capture manager in the past, I was asked to do capture, and many decisions were made by the C-suite and then the business developer, and I would sit with them, and after about 20 minutes of talking with them, I'd realize, holy cow, there's nothing behind the BD effort. And then my journey started. Win Strategy Index. What's the goodness of the evolving win strategy? We know win strategy to be those 7 or 8 high-level steps in how we're going to win strategically that factor in our offering and circumstances for our company. But can you show in a traceable, defensible, explainable manner how you got to that win strategy statement. Material evidence. How did you get there? Show me analyses that you did to get there. Don't believe me because I'm good looking or because I sound smart. Where's the evidence? And then the pursuit index is the index that helps us measure the goodness of our offering. But at the same time, if you've done a very good capture of it and you have capture effort and you have all the material artifacts, then you could sit with you could sit with the proposal manager, and you can, as part of content planning, right, pre-proposal planning, you should be turning over to the proposal team the material evidence of everything from that capture effort that's going to help them do their job. For example, an inventory of strategies, right? And an inventory of scoreable strengths, right? Aligned against evaluation factors. Lowfeld Consulting taught us many, many years ago about the value of strength-based budgeting. And we know if you don't got the strengths, the government doesn't read, they score. And you can't get the strengths unless you do the analyses. So the pursuit index helps us measure the goodness of the evolving, goodness of all the artifacts to support that. The pursuit debrief index, what did the government say about us in the end? The recompete readiness, how well are we doing today to win a business of tomorrow in terms of our readiness to recompete? We know that recompete starts on the day we win the contract. If we don't start planning for recompete at least halfway through the life of the contract, particularly say it's a 5-year contract, the competition is 2.5 years ahead of us figuring out how they're going to take it away from us. We'll never have enough time to figure out how we're going to get the work back from them. And then, of course, the growth status index, which is an aggregation of how well am I doing today to win a business tomorrow? But it's looking at your recompetes, the most important business you have, because that's the cheapest way to grow your business, land and expand. Looking at how well do you really understand the opportunities that you're bidding, the OCI, Opportunity Context Index. And it's looking at the goodness of your offering, the pursuit index. Can you answer why your company in a traceable, defensible, explainable manner? Can you show in advance of the writing, against an annotated outline, all the strengths that are traceable, defensible, explainable, that are going to give the government real quantitative benefit realization or risk mitigation, i.e. outcomes? Can you show that, for example? So these are the questions. So if we talk about P-win, Y is a function of X, P-win is a function of really these indices. And now these indices align against our business development life cycle. So you can see in the opportunity assessment phase, what indices would be most valuable? Obviously recompete readiness index. Am I putting the right things in the pipeline? The state of the opportunity index. How well the OCI, how well do I really understand to bid it? Opportunity context index. So you can sort of see how these measures measure the goodness against the evolution of the pursuit. Now, there's 8 indices, and I can't go into all the indices in this presentation. Now, if I go back to the Green Book, if I may, the book that I co-authored with Scott and Donaldson and Mario Pina, it's based upon a technique called object measurement that I used. And it just became second nature to me using this technique. And so if you look in our Green Book, and Brenda said she read it and she said she liked it, which I thought it would give her a headache because you might think, well, it's pretty technical or math in general. But we took what is really a very hard topic, trying to measure how well things are really progressing, and we try to put it into a book. So if you wanted to do those measures with an Excel spreadsheet and the formulas are there, we show you how to do it. I could do those measures with paper and pen. But we also, to be honest, we have a software that we developed that we use that automates those measurements. But to focus now, let's get back into this particular index. So Pipeline Opportunity Selection Index. Does the opportunity merit being in a business developer's pipeline? Well, this particular index helps us improve the quality of the overall pipeline. It helps determine whether it merits being in the pipeline. It helps us prioritize the best use of the business developer's time? Because if you have a low, what we call POSSE score, why would you be focusing on this opportunity, right? Resources are scarce. And it helps us provide due diligence. That's the particular thing. We are in a thinking person's business. We have to show that we've been doing due diligence. Shame on us if we think that we're going to win a $100 million contract with the VA and take care of the veterans, some young man or woman that lost their leg in the past in Iraq or Afghanistan, because we're putting something into a tool and producing an output versus producing an outcome because we really understand in a traceable, defensible, and explainable manner how we're going to give them the benefit realization. We can articulate it. And that's why the government's going more towards orals, because they're onto our industry, because people think there's shortcuts. Again, if I hit that again over and over again, I'm passionate about this. Having a contract with the federal government is a privilege. It's not a right. So it all starts with, are we pursuing the right things, going from there? So we look at the POSSE, we look at these attributes. There's 9 of them here. But in the book, as we show, that if you're doing a POSSE, you don't have to use all 9. You might decide to do 5 of the 9. You might do the 9 and add up to 5 more, what we call wild cards. But when you do it, particularly if you use the software we have, the math doesn't change. The vector analysis still works out. But the activity means, am I focusing on issues? Does the customer have issues, right? That's the first thing. Do I know there's issues and why there are issues? Does funding exist? Because there's no funding, why are we going there, right? And there's a gentleman I know, he's a friend of mine, a brilliant man, and he goes on the premise that government deals are funded and they're not sold. And I go on the premise that winning proposals are engineered, they're not written. But he talks about how companies, regardless of size, can influence funding on Capitol Hill, whether you're a big guy like Lockheed Martin or a small company. And I believe that to be true because I've seen him to be successful. But the bottom line is activity. And I always communicate in alliterations, like in this case with all A's, it helps me remember stuff. Avenue, do you have a contractual vehicle? Access, can you get access to the customer? Awareness, are you aware of their issues and their key factors? Are they aware of your corporate capabilities, right? Analysis, are you just saying things or can you show the evidence that you've done the analysis collaboratively, right, to substantiate whatever you're going to say? Availability, do we have the resources to support these business development efforts if we go into the pipeline? Can I get access to the technical SME who I need to try to engage a customer? Can I get access to that SME to get them to write the white paper that I need to engage the customer? Affinity, what's our relationship with this customer, right? Alignment, whatever we are proposing, how does it align with what the customer's existing environment, their existing systems? And again, affordability. Do we have enough money and people and time to pursue this opportunity? So these 9 attributes are 9 attributes of POSSE. You can use some or all of them, and as well as you could add some others because every company is different. But it's helping us start to answer that question. Now, when we do looking at POSSE, if you look at on the left side of the slide, you see colors, you see numbers, and you see description. So for us, we say to ourselves, we have a range here. Red would mean that it's not yet assessed to justify selection into the pipeline. You haven't done it yet. Orange, and there's a spelling mistake there, Organge. All right, forgive me, I went to public school, so that's my spelling error. It's my mistake. Is there inadequate evidence to justify selection, or is there adequate evidence, or is there more than adequate? But as you're going to see, it's not a matter of picking something because we qualify it based upon a color or a number or a description. It's about what's also the rationale. Why did you do it? It's like assumptions. People say, what's the assumption? Assumptions without rationale for the assumption is like a stool without, it's like a stool, taking away a leg from a stool. You need the rationale. So we're just not scoring something and gaming something. You have to think and you have to put your rationale into why you're scoring it that way. Now, you might not be able to read the scales on the left, but I'll give you an idea. Let's say, for example, myself, and I'll pick some random people. I'll say Nicole Reber, and I see D Bash. Let's pretend that I was a business developer, and I'm thinking about putting this into the pipeline. And Nicole and D Bash, or Bash, please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. And I'm thinking about putting this in the pipeline. I could have found it in SAM.gov, Gov1IQ. I could have heard about it from any other source. I'm thinking about putting it into the pipeline. I'm going to put some thinking into it, though. I'm going to do a pipeline opportunity selection index assessment first. So in that, I'm not just picking 0.5 yellow for activity. In our world, you're doing that, and you're also putting a rationale. I'm just not saying, for Avenue, yes, we have a contractual vehicle. I'm going to make the selection with a rationale. So you could sort of start to see how we're making the selection of these indices. But in the background, in our software, or in the Excel spreadsheet that you might have made, which we show you how to make in our book, or even if you did it on longhand on paper, you're going to end up with a calculation that aggregates using vector math, and it's not as hard as you really think it is, that aggregates those individual assessments of your thinking and the dialogue and the resulting rationale that gives you a score between 0 and 1. So in the end, you say roughly, we're like a 0.52. So what does that mean? Well, that means there's adequate evidence to select the opportunity for the BD pipeline. That means when I go to my C-suite at a BD meeting and I introduce it for the first time, I can show them in a traceable, defensible, explainable manner why I'm doing this with criteria they can recognize with a color, a number, a description, and sound rationale. And then have that discussion to see if we get their blessing, if it continues to be in the pipeline so I can do business development going forward. Now, we use these indices at a particular opportunity pursuit level. And so, for example, if you look at the lower graph, you see just a little yellow dot there. If we did an assessment in this case, it's one example, a pipeline opportunity selection index, you see here where we plot ourselves on the graph. Now, typically putting a posse in is a one-off. However, if I was doing a state of the opportunity index assessment and I'm doing business development over 3-4 months, or particularly for a high dollar value solution-based mission critical prime contracts, which would be many, many months before we go into capture, right? I'm building a trend line over time. I'm building a trend line. So if you look at the top, you can see these ratings building a trend. And ideally, we should be moving towards green. But all along the way, what we're doing to our C-suite is we're giving them transparency. We're allowing accountability for people involved, everybody involved. We're providing feedback so they can help us improve. Allowing them to provide feedback so we can improve ourselves to more improved position to win the deal. So yes, you could do this in Excel. We do it in the software that we have. And in the software that we have, we displays in a dashboard, which I won't go into details here. But so you could get enterprise level view into how things are going. So in summary, before we go into questions and answers, I'd like to say these performance measurement indexes, based upon a technique developed by Scott Donaldson and Dr. Stan Siegel over 30 years ago, that they taught me 25 years ago, that I embraced and used in managing programs and brought into doing capture, and that we use when we consult and reflective in terms of a software that we have. It helps us detect issues that derail pursuits early as leading indicators. It focuses on the critical thinking, okay? It's not about answering questions. Oh, you have a checklist that helps us answer the question and determine P-win. That's nothing. You have to show the material evidence in a traceable, defensible, explainable manner, the thinking of what we're doing. It increases transparency so people can understand what's going on early. Hey, maybe we shouldn't be pursuing this now. And here's the evidence why. Or now, hey, maybe we need resources to do this. Let's get those resources in there to help Peter. So it increases our ability to win, right? It helps us align the scorable strengths against the evaluation factors. Again, giving a plug to Lowfeld Consulting. If you don't have the strengths in advance of the writing, what are you writing to? In my world, you can't get the strengths unless you do the analyses. And what we're trying to do is support risk reduction. So when we win, we know that we can execute in a way that gives the government the most benefit realization and risk mitigation. Again, last bumper point, there's no one way to measure performance of competitive procurements. We are not saying that in any way. It's just that the book that we wrote is based upon our collective decades of experience. These are measures and how we measure that we have found useful, and we're just making those available through the book to help other companies. So I'll stop there. Brenda, I'll give you the con. I guess I hit okay.
Yes, you did. I was cheering the whole way along, Peter. Yay, verily. You were preaching to the choir here. You're not going to win a contract without hard work. And I love the way that you put this all together here into a kind of a scorable package, if you will, or a quantitative package that you can assess yourself along the way. Now I have a treat for everybody on the line right now. We are going to give away a copy of Peter's Green Book right now. That is, I have it right here for me, Missing Measurements of Competitive Procurements. It's a great book. I read it. I'm a data nerd. I loved it. Okay. So here is your question. And please put this in chat. It's going to be a number, okay? My address is 1230, and there's one last digit at the end. It's between 0 and 9. The first person who puts it in the chat will get the book. Okay. So I'm looking at the chat here. Nobody has it so far. 1230. No, not a 4. Oh, stop. Okay. Matt Doyle. Hi, Matt. Congratulations. You won the book. It's 12309. So thank you, Matt. Matt, I'm going to put my address in the chat here while you can just send me your details, and we'll get that book right out to you tomorrow, okay? Okay, there's my address. And with this, I'd like to open the floor out to some questions. I do have one burning question, Peter and Scott. I know you've been implementing this philosophy now for a while. Based on your findings, just out of curiosity, what has been the quickest thing that companies have added to, after implementing your philosophies? What's the quickest outcome or benefit that they have realized, or any trends that you have seen? I just be curious.
I would say that when companies do the upfront work, right, and that they can, and essentially you talk about content planning, and you can think about your long career, Brenda, and you can relate to this. When you can lay out materially, right, that this is just not a graphic that we're putting in a solicitation, but this is why we're putting it there. And this is the basis for it. So what it's doing is it's providing rationale to why people are doing things.
So, what have people changed most about how they do this based on any particular habit that they've changed?
Well, what they do is they may not use all of the attributes of a particular index because every company is different. Companies they view things differently, right? Different businesses, so they may use certain attributes. So say have an opportunity context index, which has 40 measurements in there. So they might do just say 27 of the 40, and they might add in a few more of their own. So it's not meant to be it's meant to be tailorable, but to help you measure what's important to you to help you get that insight and understanding you need.
Oh,
Peter, you
very.
might mention, Peter,
Please
you
go ahead,
might
Scott.
mention the first customer that you had when they did the competitive procurement stuff.
Yeah, well, it's they had 5 business developers they were paying $180,000 each to, and they quickly realized they didn't have a pipeline because these individuals they were just pulling stuff out of Gov1IQ, and they were building a pipeline, but it was a pipeline that didn't have any analysis to it. They just had stuff in there, and you'd say, "Oh, I have this stuff." And sadly, that's what really happens in most businesses. And another thing that happens is we're going to go ahead and we're going to use a generative AI tool because it's telling us this is exactly what we should be doing, and we're going to accept that. What am I paying you for then? Am I paying you to think? We're being paid to think. We're in a thinking person's business. And that's, so that was a very unfortunate situation back with that company. It took that company 2 years to recover from that.
I actually have another question that one of our attendees have direct messaged me is that we are in a very unique time in government with concerning our pipelines, with so many things being delayed. Um, any adjustment to the measurements or any thoughts? Because I think sometimes it's not necessarily a fault of the capture manager. Some things can be put on reflective delay. We've had the government shutdown. Any advice there, Peter?
Well, that's a good question. Okay. Winning is a whole company effort. At the end of the day, you say, well, we lost the deal. And I'm talking honestly. Whose fault is it? To me, it's always the C-suite.
Hmm.
Why? You've put that person in that position. Were they on the right seat of the bus? And did you equip them to be successful? That's the first thing, right? So companies, I think, have to be more judicious about what they're bidding. And if you want to say bid everything, you'll lose everything. Focus is key. And I would say that it's counterintuitive. You see companies that regrettably they're laying off staff and their solicitations are waiting. But the companies are going to be the win in the end. This is go right back earlier. I said culture. It's not technology, process, or tool that helps us win. It's culture. The most committed win. So those companies that are most committed to say, even if things are hard right now, we don't have money, we're going to invest in our people, right?
Hmm.
And we're going to do the upfront work because this is going to end at some point. A lot of us thought that if that October 1st things would have been a little bit different, and political things happened. But that spigot's going to turn on eventually. But the reality is we're in a more competitive environment now than ever before. It's always going to be this way. It is things are not the GovCon as we know it is over, but those companies that are willing to do the upfront work and measure, like Peter Drucker had that quote. I'll probably anything that anything worth managing has to be measured, or something like that. Please
Yes,
forgive me. I got it right here. It's you can't manage what you don't measure.
that's
Okay,
right.
you can't manage what you don't measure. So why would we change how we do our business, whether it's times of plenty or times of want?
Mhm.
We should still have discipline. So all we're offering is a way to do discipline. We shouldn't slack off because we're in times of want, right?
Indeed. Well, I'd like to thank Peter and Scott. Guys, this has been amazing. What I love about your presentation, it was just filled with great advice to quantitatively go ahead and measure yourself to make sure you're improving and getting the best result for your company through hard work. So I applaud you guys and thank you. And
Thank
for
you,
all of our
Brenda.
listeners here, we will see you in December for our award ceremony. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.